Hi and welcome to Berwick Baptist Church online this morning. Last week we looked at Jesus, the giver of rest, and this Sunday we're going to have a look at Jesus, friend of sinners. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 11 verses 16 to 19. This is Jesus talking. To what can I compare this generation? It's like children playing a game in the public square. They complain to their friends, "We played wedding songs and you didn't dance. We played funeral songs and you didn't mourn." For John the Baptist didn't spend his time eating and drinking, and you say, "He's possessed by a demon." The Son of Man, on the other hand, feasts and drinks, and you say, "He's a glutton and a drunkard, and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners." But wisdom is shown to be right by its results. Son of Man was one of Jesus' favourite names for himself, and he's reporting here on what religious people, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, what those religious people were saying about him. He's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners. So we're going to look today at Jesus, friend of sinners. A few years ago, Alpha in the USA commissioned a survey by the Barna Group where they asked people what they value in a person they could talk to about spiritual things. The top 3 qualities in order were these. First of all, someone who will listen without judgment. You could say that listening attentively, actively, is one of the purest acts of love. What's a good listener? A good listener, first of all, is somebody who assumes the best about the person they're listening to, doesn't come with prejudgment, preconception. Secondly, it's somebody who can absorb all the questions and stories that come from that person, not so they can reach a verdict, but to allow the person to process the feelings and experiences in a relationship. The sad thing is that only 1/3 of the people surveyed said that they had someone like that. Surely that's something we should all be able to do. It's love, it's grace, it's being a real friend. Secondly, they wanted someone who will allow them to draw their own conclusions. Somebody who remembers that they're not projects, they're people. And trust them. Trust them to have their own spiritual journey. Sometimes I think that maybe God and our friends want us to get out of the way. God has promised to be found by those who seriously seek him. And sometimes we just get in the way. Jesus didn't ever trick, bully or coerce people into praying a sinner's prayer. He trusted them and he loved them and he left them to find their own path to God, to take their own spiritual journey. Thirdly, they want someone who can confidently share their own perspective. So, having listened to them and given them space to draw their own conclusions, then and only then do people want to hear our stories. And our stories need to be real. They need to be genuine and coming from a place of genuine conviction. They don't want to hear about someone else's experience of God. They don't want to hear how someone else came to Jesus. They want to hear your story, my story, with genuine conviction. In a sense, you could say that by this time, we've earned the right to tell our story. And our story, after all, is the best evidence that we can offer as we tell what difference God has made to our lives in our past, our present, and our future. Put succinctly, basically, people are looking for friends. Someone who listens without judgment, helps you make your own decisions and loves you no matter what. They want friends who will live the good news, be good news, and share the good news in the form of their own story. But here's some bad news. A recent article by Mike Frost on the Church Leaders website starts by recounting the number of times that the author has been told church people were friendly enough. They were hospitable and welcoming. They're nice to you, but no one becomes your friend. Now, of course, I guess that would be different in different churches. You can't make a blanket statement that says that all churches are like that. But clearly from this work that's been done, there are a lot of people who find we're like that. The article goes on to look at some of the reasons why in church, and actually in wider society too, we're really poor at making friends. You could say, in fact, that in the world we live in the culture that we exist in, there's a real famine of friendship. And for me, the crunch comes when I think that if we find it so hard to be friends with people who've actually got far enough along their journey to actually be in church with us, people who are like us, what chance do we have of being a friend of sinners? And that brings us neatly back to our scripture passage. Jesus was always being criticised by religious people for hanging out with the wrong kind of people. And sometimes I wonder, could that same criticism be levelled at me, be levelled at you, that you are a friend of sinners? Are all our friends just like us? Are we only friends with other followers of Jesus? This really challenges me. And when I'm challenged, I'm reminded, as I said last week, that becoming like Jesus is all about him. He is the centre of everything that we want to be and want to become. So if I want to know how to be a really good friend and a friend of sinners, I need to look at Jesus. What did he do? How did he do it? How did Jesus share the good news? Well, first of all, he didn't invite people to go to church or, well, temple and synagogue in those days. He simply invited people to have a relationship with God. He helped people to find their place in God's kingdom on earth. Last week, we said that it was as simple, really, as Jesus said, "Come to me." How did he issue that invitation to come that we talked about last week? He did it in all sorts of different ways. Jesus says that his mission was to seek and save those who are lost. And if he had a strategy, his simple strategy was this: friendship and blessing. He wanted to be a friend to all people, especially those who were on the edges. He invited people to share his life so that he could bless them in whatever way they needed blessing, whatever way would make their life more whole, more complete. And so, unsurprisingly, people wanted to be with Jesus wherever he was. Children, the lowest of the low in the culture of the time, in the society of the time, children wanted, loved to go and be with Jesus, and Jesus didn't turn them away, even when other people wanted to. He was there with the tax collectors and the other sinners, the prostitutes, the people who were just so looked down on. Jesus was their friend. In the book Bless by Dave and John Ferguson, they set out a very simple and memorable way to build those sorts of friendships. I told you that the sermon that I preached last week and this week were based on a couple of books that I've read recently and that have made an impression on me and maybe acted as kind of jumping off points for the teaching in these 2 Sunday mornings. So Bless by Dave and John Ferguson. They looked at Jesus, they looked at the way he did things, and they wrote this book to help the likes of you and I to be a good friend and to bless saints and sinners alike. It's a whole sermon series in itself, actually. I haven't got time to do that, but here's a taste of what they say. If it sparks some interest in you, well, get the book. That's all I can say. Now, I have to say straight away that I'm not a great lover of formulas and clever schemes. But I find this really helpful. It's a really helpful way to think of how we can build friendships the way Jesus did with saints and sinners alike. So what the Fergusons do is they take the word bless, B-L-E-S-S, and they turn it into a sort of acronym where each letter, actually it's a mnemonic, isn't it, really, to be strictly accurate. Each letter begins a word that tells you how to be a good friend. So they start off, bless, begin with prayer. Begin with prayer. Just like Jesus did in Luke 6:12, when he was beginning his ministry on planet Earth, before he actually set out and called disciples and started travelling and all the other things he did, he spent a night praying on a mountain, asking his Father what his priorities should be, who are the people he should concentrate on. It's how we too discover our mission and how we go on living out that mission, just as Jesus frequently took times alone with God the Father when he needed to sort things out. So begin by asking God, Lord, who should I bless? And where can I be a blessing? And then as God shows you the people and the places he wants you to bless, begin praying for those people and those places. Begin with prayer. L, listen. Now, Jesus was always asking questions and listening for the answers. Jesus was really good too, because he often saw through, and it wasn't just the spoken answers that interested him, it was the unspoken things as well. Luke 18, 35 to 37 and 39 to 41, Jesus is travelling and there's a blind man who starts calling out to him, making a fuss. And eventually Jesus says, get him over here. And so this blind man is helped across to Jesus, and Jesus looks at him and says, what do you want me to do for you? Now, you may think, what a stupid question. The guy's blind. He wants to get his sight back. But Jesus didn't make that assumption. There might have been something else on that man's mind that was much more important than even getting his eyesight back. Jesus listened to the man before he acted. And a relationship with anybody begins when we listen to someone's words and someone's life. Truly listening to someone may be the kindest gift that we can ever give, especially in our busy, noisy, electronic, gadget-obsessed world. Some commentators reckon that because of the constant noise that's going on in the world, we actually need lessons. We need teaching and learning on how to be active listeners, how to really listen to people. We need that in our churches, our schools and other organisations, in politics. We need to know how to listen. We need to take time to listen. So bless, begin with prayer. Listen. E, eat. If you've read through the Gospels, you will have noticed that Jesus always seemed to be sharing meals with people. Just like in Matthew 9, 10 to 12, where he's having a meal with a tax collector and his mates and gets a lot of criticism for it. Jesus liked to eat, especially with other people. I reckon shared meals are great for moving relationships past acquaintance towards friendship. And maybe that's something that happens faster than anything else that we might do. And of course, a shared meal doesn't necessarily have to be a big thing. It could be something at your house. It could be going out somewhere together. It could be a simple cup of coffee where you stop together. You take time to listen, to eat together, to begin to build a closer relationship of trust. Barriers can come down when you're sharing a meal. The old monastics knew how great this was. They practiced the monastic practice of hospitality, where people could go into the monastery, be listened to, be cared for, be fed. And the old monks used to reckon that one of the reasons they did that was because, well, they'd seen the Bible episodes where strangers arrived and the people that they went to discovered that they were entertaining angels and they weren't aware of it. So the monks reckoned it was always good to welcome the stranger just in case. And although our friends, the people we're building the friendship with, may not exactly be angels, they're certainly God's gift to us. Begin with prayer, listen, eat together. Serve is the first of the two S's. Matthew 20:28, Jesus said, "Even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." Service was the key to Jesus' mission. He modelled how, once you begin with prayer, really listen and eat with someone, the chances are that you'll discover how you can best serve this person that God is asking you to bless. And when you discover the best way to serve them, well as actively getting on with it, it's back to prayer. Lord, help me to bless this person in the way that I know they need to be blessed. And then we come to the final S. Begin with prayer. Listen, eat, serve. And the final S stands for story. When people were ready to listen, Jesus would tell them his story. Like in John 14, where the disciples came with some problems and Jesus told them the answers that they needed to hear. He shared his life and his story with them. When people feel relationally safe with you and me, because they feel that you're a genuine friend, they'll want to know what it is that makes you tick. What is it that makes you you? What is it that makes you different? What is it that makes you have an interest and to care for them when nobody else seems to? And they give you permission to tell your story. You don't have to shove it down their throats. They want to know because you've arrived at that point in your friendship. Now, if someone asks you, hey, so tell us about this faith you have. Could you do it? Could you do it clearly and confidently? Could you tell your story? One of the problems we sometimes have as Christians is when we're asked to tell our story, what we do is we tend to focus on how the story began. This is how I became a Christian. This is how I got to know Jesus. That's in the past. People want to know, so what's that relationship with Jesus mean to you now? What's Jesus doing in your life now? People also want to know, how does your relationship with Jesus affect your future, affect your view of your future, affect the way that you approach your future? So it's only when We've begun with prayer. We've listened. We've eaten. We've served. Then and only then do we have permission to tell people how the love of God, the life, death, and the resurrection of Jesus have changed our lives, past, present, and future. So I hope you find that useful. Bless. Begin with prayer. Listen. Eat together. Serve. Tell your story. The last thing I want to say. Somehow we've made something that should be very simple, very complicated. We worry about sharing our faith. We worry about doing evangelism and witnessing. So my final point is this. I believe Jesus wants us to stop stressing. Jesus told a story in Mark chapter 4, 26 to 29. Jesus also said, "The kingdom of God is like a farmer who scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, while he's asleep or awake, the seed sprouts and grows, but he doesn't understand how it happens. The earth produces the crops on its own. First, a leaf blade pushes through, then the heads of wheat are formed, and finally the grain ripens. And as soon as the grain is ready, the farmer comes and harvests it with a sickle, for the harvest time has come." And it's about time we got the message that Jesus, through his Spirit, brings people to faith, not us. Unquestionably, we have a part to play in that. As we bless people, we go through the steps of blessing people and being a real friend. But at the end of the day, you cannot bully, cajole, scare persons, people into becoming followers of Jesus. Only Jesus, through his Spirit, says, "Come to me." Only Jesus calls people and genuinely brings about a change in their life. So look, stop stressing and striving. Just get on with living your life with Jesus, living the life he's given you, making friends and blessing them with what God gives you to bless them. And when you get the opportunity, tell your story when you're asked, and see what God does.